The Witch's Road Sleep Story. Calming magical folklore to fall asleep to. Close your eyes and let yourself drift into the mists of ancient memory, where the boundary between our world and the other world grows thin. Tonight, we walk together down a path that has existed in whispers and shadows for countless generations, a path known to those who practice the old ways as the Witch's Road. This is not a place you'll find on any map, nor is it a trail you can stumble upon during an afternoon hike through the woods. This mysterious pathway exists in the liminal spaces of our world, appearing only to those who know how to look, or more importantly, how to listen. According to folklore passed down through generations of practitioners, the Witch's Road is said to be a spiritual pathway that connects sacred sites, ancient groves, and places of power across the landscape. It winds invisibly through forests and fields, crossing over ley lines and energy points that our ancestors recognized long before we paved over them with concrete and steel. Imagine, if you will, a moonlit night in medieval Europe. A solitary figure moves quietly through the darkness, keeping to the edges of villages, following paths that only she can see. This is how the legend begins, with the cunning folk, the healers, the wise women and men who needed to travel between communities under the cover of night. The origins of the Witch's Road are deeply intertwined with the historical reality of village healers and folk magic practitioners who would travel from town to town, sharing knowledge and providing services that the church could not or would not offer. These travelers couldn't use the main roads, you see. The roads belonged to the daylight world, to merchants and soldiers and priests. But the witches had their own roads, secret ways through the wilderness that kept them safe from prying eyes and dangerous accusations. As these wise travelers moved through the night, they would mark their passage in subtle ways. A bent twig here, a particular stone arrangement there, symbols carved into tree bark that only the initiated could read. In many traditions, particularly in British and Germanic folklore, the Witch's Road was believed to be marked by natural signs, unusual tree formations, rings of mushrooms, or places where the morning dew formed peculiar patterns. These weren't just practical waymarkers. They were believed to indicate places where the veil between worlds was naturally thinner, where magic flowed more freely, where one might encounter the fae or receive visions from the spirits. The road itself was said to shift and change. One night it might lead you through a dense oak forest. The next time you walked it, the same journey might take you along the edge of a misty moor. This wasn't seen as inconsistency, but as the road's true nature, a living pathway that responded to the needs of the traveler and the turning of the seasons. The Witch's Road was never considered a fixed physical path, but rather a mystical route that could only be traversed in an altered state of consciousness, through meditation, ritual, or dreamwalking. This spiritual dimension of the road meant that two witches might walk the same section on the same night and experience entirely different landscapes, each seeing what they needed to see for their own magical development. Those who walked the Witch's Road regularly spoke of meeting others along the way, fellow travelers who appeared suddenly in the darkness, shared knowledge or warnings, and then vanished just as quickly into the night. Were these encounters with other living practitioners, or something else entirely? The folklore suggests both possibilities, telling us that the road exists simultaneously in our world and in the realm of spirits. Many traditions hold that the Witch's Road serves as a meeting place not just for mortal practitioners, but also for spirits, ancestors, and other worldly beings who wish to commune with those brave enough to walk between the worlds. A witch traveling the road might find herself walking alongside the ghost of a great practitioner from centuries past, learning secrets that had been buried with the bones. The timing of when one walked the road was crucial. Certain nights were considered more auspicious, more dangerous, yes, but also more powerful. The full moon, naturally, lit the way and opened the doors between realms. The dark moon concealed the traveler but demanded courage to face the utter blackness. And then there were the cross-quarter days, those ancient festival times when the boundaries dissolved almost entirely. According to Celtic and other European folk traditions, The Witch's Road was most accessible during liminal times, twilight, midnight, dawn, and especially during the cross-quarter days like Samhain and Beltane, when the barriers between the physical and spiritual worlds were at their thinnest. On these nights, it was said that even those without training might accidentally stumble onto the road and find themselves in a world that operated by different rules, where time moved strangely and the familiar landscape became alien and full of wonder. But the road demanded respect, always. Those who walked it learned quickly that they were guests in a realm that predated human civilization, that would continue long after humanity faded into memory. There were protocols to follow, offerings to leave, words that must never be spoken aloud in certain places. The folklore warns us that the Witch's Road tests those who travel it, presenting challenges and illusions to determine the worthiness of the seeker. A disrespectful traveler might find the road leading them in circles, returning them to their starting point at dawn, exhausted and no wiser. Or worse, the road might lead them somewhere from which they could not easily return, into the hollow hills, into the realm of the Fae, into places where human concepts of time and space no longer applied. And so the path winds on, through centuries and across continents, carried in the memories and practices of those who remember the old ways. The Witch's Road calls to something ancient within us, to that part of our souls that remembers when the world was wider and wilder, when magic was as real as the earth beneath our feet. Let us walk further now, deeper into the mysteries of this ancient pathway. As we continue our journey, we come to understand that the Witch's Road was never walked alone, not truly. Even when a practitioner traveled in solitude, there were always companions, seen and unseen, invited and unexpected. In the folklore of many European traditions, particularly in Germany and Scandinavia, it was believed that familiar spirits and animal guides would accompany witches along their road, serving as protectors and navigators through the otherworldly terrain. These weren't the black cats and toads of fairy tale imagination, though such creatures were certainly honored. The true familiars of the road were often spectral in nature, ghostly hares that bounded ahead to show the way, great ravens whose cawing warned of danger, or pale wolves whose eyes glowed with an inner light. Some traditions spoke of the fetch, a spirit double of the witch herself, who walked a few steps ahead, testing the path and absorbing any malevolent energies that might lie in wait. The road itself was said to be lined with specific plants and trees, each holding their own significance in the craft. Hawthorn trees were particularly important, those twisted, thorny guardians of thresholds and boundaries. Walking past a hawthorn on the Witch's Road required a gesture of respect, perhaps a whispered blessing or a small offering tucked into its roots. According to British and Irish lore, the Witch's Road was often bordered by sacred plants, especially hawthorn, elder and rowan, which served as natural wards and markers, their presence indicating that one was indeed on the true path and not lost in some deceiving maze created by mischievous spirits. The elder trees, sometimes called the Witch's Tree, were believed to house protective spirits who would look kindly upon respectful travelers but bring misfortune to those who damaged their branches. As you walked deeper into the night, you might notice that sound behaved strangely on the Witch's Road. Distant noises seemed close, while nearby sounds faded into nothing. The normal chorus of night creatures would sometimes fall into an eerie silence, and in that silence you might hear other things, music that had no earthly source, voices speaking in languages that predated Latin, the sound of hoofbeats though no horse was visible. Many accounts from witch trial records and folklore collections describe the phenomenon of unearthly music heard along the Witch's Road, pipes, drums, and singing that seemed to come from beneath the earth or from the air itself, believed to be the revelry of fairy folk or the spirits of ancient peoples. Some travelers claimed this music was so beautiful it could make you weep, while others said it filled them with a wild, almost frightening joy. The wisest travelers knew not to follow such music too eagerly, for it might lead you away from your intended destination and into a dance that lasted until dawn, or until 100 years had passed in the mortal world. The road had its geography, its landmarks that existed in myth and memory. There were certain crossroads known to those who walked the path, places where multiple branches of the witch's road intersected, creating points of immense power and equal danger. European folklore, particularly from the Germanic and Slavic traditions, speaks of sacred crossroads along the witch's road where witches would gather to share knowledge, perform group rituals, or make pacts with spirits. These crossroads existed in both the physical and spiritual realms simultaneously, marked in the mundane world by ancient boundary stones or weathered shrines. At these crossroads, one might leave offerings for Hecate, the ancient goddess of witchcraft and keeper of the keys to all pathways. Or you might encounter other travelers and learn news from distant lands, discover which herbs were thriving that season, or receive warnings about witch hunters active in certain regions. The seasons transformed the road in profound ways. In spring, when the earth awakened, the witch's road was said to bloom with flowers that existed nowhere else, luminous blossoms that glowed in the darkness, releasing scents that could induce visions or healing or deep sleep. Summer brought its own magic, with the road winding through fields of grain that whispered secrets in languages only the initiated understood. But it was autumn when the road truly came alive, when the veil thinned and the spirits of the dead walked freely alongside the living. Winter turned the witch's road into something stark and crystalline, a path through snow-covered landscapes where every footprint told a story and the silence held a quality of waiting, of potential energy gathered in the frozen earth. In Scandinavian and Northern European traditions, the winter witch's road was considered the most dangerous but also the most illuminating, for in the long darkness, the inner light of the practitioner burned brightest, and visions came with startling clarity. There were shelters along the way, though they too existed in that uncertain space between physical and spiritual. Sometimes a traveler would find a cottage in the woods, smoke rising from its chimney, warm light spilling from its windows. Inside, an old woman or man might offer bread and ale, a place by the fire, and conversation that contained layers of meaning. These way station keepers were themselves part of the road's mystery. Were they human practitioners like yourself, or were they something else? Guardians, perhaps, or spirits who had taken on the task of aiding travelers. The folklore suggests that the witch's road contains safe houses and sanctuaries, often appearing as humble cottages or hidden groves, where travelers could rest and restore themselves, though some stories warn that accepting the hospitality of these places bound you to certain obligations or extracted a price that might not be apparent until much later. And here is something that many forget in the retelling: the witch's road was not only walked by night. Yes, darkness was its natural element, but there were daytime journeys too, undertaken in full sunlight by those bold or desperate enough. These daylight walks were different in character, less mystical perhaps, but no less magical. Walking the witch's road by day meant seeing how it overlaid the ordinary world, how a busy market square might sit atop an ancient gathering place, how a modern highway might parallel an invisible path trodden by countless feet over countless centuries. Some traditions, particularly in Mediterranean and Southern European folklore, speak of walking the witch's road during the afternoon hours, especially during the midday pause when the sun reached its zenith and all sensible people rested, for this too was a liminal time when the ordinary rules relaxed their grip and the road might reveal itself to the attentive traveler. These midday journeys required different skills: the ability to see beyond the surface of things, to recognize the sacred in the mundane, to understand that magic doesn't always announce itself with thunder and lightning but sometimes whispers in the rustle of leaves at noon. The road taught many lessons to those who walked it regularly. Patience, certainly, for the road revealed its secrets in its own time, never hurrying, never forcing. Humility, for even the most powerful which was small and temporary compared to the ancient currents of power that flowed through the path. Courage, because there were genuine dangers, both from the mundane world of witch hunters and suspicious villagers, and from the other world with its capricious spirits and testing trials. And perhaps most importantly, the road taught discernment, the ability to distinguish between true spiritual experience and mere illusion, between helpful spirits and those who meant harm, between a path that led toward wisdom and one that led toward destruction. As we pause here in our journey, imagine yourself standing on the Witch's Road at this very moment. Feel the earth beneath your feet. Is it solid, or does it seem to pulse with hidden energy? Listen to the sounds around you. What do you hear in the spaces between silence? The road is always there, waiting for those who know how to find it, and perhaps in the drift between waking and sleeping, you too might catch a glimpse of that ancient pathway winding through the darkness, leading ever onward into mystery. Let us continue our journey now, venturing deeper still into the lore of this mystical path. As we walk, we come to understand that the Witch's Road was intimately connected to water, to rivers and streams, to sacred wells and hidden springs. Throughout European folklore, particularly in Celtic traditions, the Witch's Road was said to follow the courses of underground water, those hidden rivers that flow beneath the surface of the earth, invisible but powerful. Dowsers and water witches claimed they could feel these currents, and where the underground waters crossed, there the Witch's Road would pass as well. Wells were particularly significant, not the common village wells, but the old wells, the forgotten ones tucked away in overgrown corners of the landscape. These ancient water sources were believed to be portals along the Witch's Road, places where one could commune with water spirits, receive prophetic visions in the well's dark mirror, or leave offerings for the goddesses of springs and flowing water. Some traditions held that if you gazed into such a well at midnight while standing on the Witch's Road, you might see not your own reflection but the face of your fate, or visions of events yet to come. The road also had its gatekeepers, beings whose role was to challenge travelers, to ensure that only those with proper intent and preparation passed certain thresholds. These weren't always menacing figures. Sometimes they appeared as children asking riddles, or ancient beggars requesting aid, or beautiful strangers offering temptations. Folklore from across Europe describes threshold guardians along the Witch's Road, spirits or enchanted beings who would test travelers through riddles, tasks, or moral choices, granting passage only to those who demonstrated wisdom, compassion, or proper knowledge of the old ways. The tests were never the same twice, for the guardians could perceive the heart of the traveler and knew precisely which challenge would reveal their true nature. A greedy person might be offered gold that would turn to leaves by morning. A cruel one might encounter someone in need and reveal themselves through indifference. But those who passed with grace and wisdom found themselves deeper on the road, with new knowledge settling into their bones like ancient memory awakening. There were sections of the Witch's Road that became famous, or perhaps infamous, among practitioners. Certain stretches acquired names and reputations that spread through the hidden networks of the craft. In the forests of Germany, there was said to be a portion called the Whispering Mile, where every tree spoke if you knew how to listen, sharing the accumulated wisdom of centuries. In the moorlands of Scotland, a stretch known as the Grey Path was rumored to exist partially outside of time itself, so that travelers who walked it would arrive at their destinations hours before they should have, or sometimes hours after, with no memory of the time between. The folklore speaks of legendary sections of the Witch's Road with specific names and properties, like the Broken Path in Eastern Europe, said to lead into the realm of the dead, or the Singing Way in Wales, where the stones themselves hummed with ancient power on certain nights. These famous stretches became destinations in their own right, places where witches would journey specifically to experience their unique magic or to complete certain rites of passage that could only be performed in those particular locations. The relationship between the Witch's Road and the moon deserves its own reflection. While we've mentioned the full moon's illumination, the connection runs far deeper. The road itself was said to wax and wane with the lunar cycle, growing stronger and more accessible as the moon grew full, becoming faint and difficult to find during the dark moon, though never disappearing entirely, for those who had walked it long enough could find it even in utter darkness. Many traditions hold that the Witch's Road is fundamentally linked to lunar energy, with different phases of the moon revealing different aspects of the path. The waxing moon for journeys of growth and learning, the full moon for ceremonies and gatherings, the waning moon for banishing and releasing, and the dark moon for the most profound mysteries and communications with the deepest spirits. Some practitioners claimed they could feel the moon's pull on the road itself, as if the path were made partly of moonlight and shadow, shifting and shimmering with the changing phases. Children born to those who regularly walked the Witch's Road were said to carry a special mark, not always visible to the eye, but recognizable to those who knew what to look for. These children of the road, as they were sometimes called, grew up with one foot in each world, able to perceive things that others missed, drawn to the liminal and the magical as naturally as others were drawn to hearth and home. The lore tells us that children born during a mother's journey on the Witch's Road, or conceived under its influence, would possess innate magical abilities and a natural affinity for walking between worlds, though this gift was also seen as a burden, for such children could never fully belong to the ordinary world and often felt the call of the road throughout their lives. These children were sought after as apprentices, for they required less teaching. The road had already written its lessons into their very being before they took their first breath. The Witch's Road had its own calendar of observances, aligned with but not identical to the common festivals of the year. Yes, the great Sabbats were honored, Samhain and Beltane, the summer and winter solstices, but there were other days too, known only to those who walked the path. Days when certain flowers bloomed that bloomed nowhere else, or when particular stars aligned in ways that opened specific gates along the road. There were also personal observances, the anniversary of one's first successful journey, or the night when you first heard your true name spoken by the wind, or the moment when you realized the road had chosen you as much as you had chosen it. In various traditions, initiates into the craft would undergo a ritual first journey on the Witch's Road during specific auspicious times, often at the new moon following their training, or on the anniversary of a significant death or transformation in their life, marking their transition from student to practitioner with the sacred pilgrimage. This first journey was both a test and a baptism, a crossing over into a new way of being that could never be fully reversed. The things you carried on the road mattered greatly. Not just the practical items, the knife, the herbs, the protective amulets, but the invisible burdens and gifts you brought with you. Your fears walked the road alongside you, as did your hopes and your grief. The road had a way of making internal states external, of giving form to emotions and thoughts. A traveler consumed by anger might find the path turning hostile, thorns reaching out to snag and scratch, the very earth seeming to resist their steps. But one who walked with an open heart might find the road opening before them in unexpected ways, revealing shortcuts and secret places, offering encounters with helpful spirits and meaningful signs. Practitioners were advised to cleanse themselves spiritually before walking the Witch's Road, through fasting, meditation, ritual bathing, or confession of wrongdoings, because the road would reflect and amplify whatever state you brought to it, and unresolved shadows could manifest as very real obstacles or even dangerous encounters. This wasn't punishment, but simply the nature of a path that existed as much in consciousness as in geography. And there were those who became lost on the road. Not everyone who set foot upon it found their way back unchanged, and some did not find their way back at all. The folklore is full of cautionary tales. The witch who followed a will-o-wisp too far from the path and wandered in the marshes until morning found her, mad and babbling. The young apprentice who tried to walk the road before he was ready and aged 20 years in a single night. The prideful practitioner who refused the guidance of spirits and found herself trapped in a loop, walking the same mile of road for what felt like years until she finally learned the humility required to ask for help. But these stories weren't meant to frighten people away from the road. They were teachings, warnings that the path required respect, preparation, and a certain surrender of ego. The road would teach you what you needed to learn, but not always gently, and never on your timeline but on its own. As we rest again in our journey, feel how the road has become more real to you, more present. Perhaps you've realized that you've been walking versions of this path all your life without knowing its name. Every choice that led you deeper into mystery, every moment when you chose magic over mundanity, every time you trusted your intuition over conventional wisdom, these were steps on the Witch's Road. The path has always been there, winding through your life like a silver thread, waiting for you to recognize it and walk it consciously. Deeper now, we walk together into the heart of the mystery. The Witch's Road reveals itself in layers, each journey peeling back another veil, showing you something you weren't ready to see before. And one of the most profound aspects of the road is how it connects not just places, but times as well. Many practitioners reported experiences of temporal fluidity along the Witch's Road, moments when past, present, and future seem to exist simultaneously. You might turn a corner and find yourself walking through a landscape as it existed 1,000 years ago, witnessing ancient ceremonies, seeing the old forests before they were cleared, hearing languages that have been dead for centuries. According to folklore from various European traditions, the Witch's Road exists outside normal time, allowing travelers to occasionally glimpse or even briefly step into other eras, particularly during solstices and equinoxes when the temporal boundaries grow thin alongside the spiritual ones. Some accounts speak of witches encountering their own ancestors on the road, walking alongside grandmothers who died before they were born, learning directly from those who carried the knowledge first. Others tell of meeting their future selves, aged and wise, who offered cryptic advice or warnings that would only make sense years later. The road also served as a library of sorts, though its books were written in wind and stone and the patterns of stars. Every tree along the path held memories in its rings, every rock formation was a text for those who could read it. The folklore speaks of natural archives along the Witch's Road, ancient trees, standing stones, and sacred groves that stored magical knowledge and historical memory, which could be accessed by practitioners through meditation, trance, or direct communion with the spirits inhabiting these places. An experienced roadwalker could place their hand on a particular oak and receive flashes of insight, spells used by practitioners centuries ago, knowledge of herbs that once grew in that spot, warnings about mistakes made and lessons learned. This living library was constantly being updated too, as each generation of witches added their own experiences and discoveries to the collective memory stored along the path. There were protocols for meeting others on the road, etiquette that had evolved over countless encounters. When two practitioners met while walking, particularly if they were strangers to each other, there were traditional greetings and ways of establishing trust. You didn't ask someone their mundane name, not initially. On the road, you might use your craft name or simply acknowledge each other as fellow travelers. There was a traditional exchange practiced along the Witch's Road when two practitioners met, sharing a small piece of knowledge, a useful herb or a blessing, never meeting without giving something of value to the other traveler, for it was believed that empty-handed encounters on the road brought ill fortune to both parties. This exchange wasn't about the material value of what was shared but about the principle of reciprocity, the understanding that knowledge and magic flow rather than accumulate, that hoarding wisdom on the Witch's Road would cause it to stagnate and sour. The road had its own weather, independent of the mundane climate surrounding it. You might walk the Witch's Road through a summer meadow and encounter snow, or travel during a thunderstorm yet find yourself under clear, star-filled skies. This wasn't random but meaningful. The weather on the road was said to reflect spiritual conditions, the emotional and magical atmosphere of that particular time and place. Fog, for instance, often appeared at points of confusion or decision, obscuring the way forward until the traveler gained clarity about their true intention. Traditions hold that the Witch's Road generates its own atmospheric conditions based on spiritual and magical energies: gentle rain during times of emotional healing, fierce winds during periods of great change, and eerie calm before significant supernatural encounters. Experienced practitioners learn to read this weather, understanding that a sudden chill might warn of hostile spirits nearby, or that an unexpected warm breeze could signal the presence of benevolent ancestors offering encouragement. Animals along the road were never quite ordinary. Even a common rabbit or deer, when encountered on the Witch's Road, carried potential significance. Was it simply an animal, or was it a shapeshifter, a spirit guide, or a witch in their traveling form? The folklore is rich with stories of witches who could take animal form to walk the road more safely or swiftly. Hares were particularly favored, as were owls and cats. There are countless tales of animal transformation along the Witch's Road, where practitioners could assume the form of night creatures to travel more safely or to access areas of the path that were impassable to humans, though such transformations were considered advanced magic that required years of training and carried significant risks if performed incorrectly. The danger wasn't just in the transformation itself, but in forgetting to change back, in becoming so comfortable in the animal form that the human mind began to fade, replaced by instinct and wildness. Stories warned of witches who ran as hares for too long and forgot they were ever human. There were songs associated with the days in the woods, passed down through oral tradition, never written because writing would have fixed them, made them static. These songs were alive, changing slightly with each singer, each generation, adapting to new times while maintaining their essential power. They were songs of protection, songs to open the way, songs to call guides and allies, songs to close the path behind you when you'd finished your journey. The road songs served multiple purposes according to tradition. They helped travelers maintain the correct rhythm and pace for trance-walking. They encoded directions and warnings in their verses. They identified you as a legitimate roadwalker to any spirits or other practitioners you might encounter, and their vibrations helped align the walker's energy with the frequency of the path itself. Some of these songs were gentle lullabies, meant to soothe the fears that naturally arose when walking between worlds. Others were powerful chants that seemed to vibrate in the chest and belly, grounding you while simultaneously lifting you into altered states of consciousness. The concept of permission was crucial when it came to the witch's road. You couldn't simply decide to walk it and expect success. The road had to accept you, or perhaps more accurately, you had to develop the kind of consciousness that made the road visible to you. This often came through initiation, whether formal initiation into a tradition or the informal initiation of life experiences that broke you open and rewired your perception. According to many traditions, walking the witch's road required either formal initiation by an established practitioner who already walked the path, or a spontaneous spiritual crisis, what some called the dark night of the soul, that shattered ordinary consciousness and made the road visible as a result of that breaking open. Those who tried to force their way onto the road without this permission or preparation often found themselves unable to find it at all, or worse, found themselves on something that resembled the road but was actually a deceptive path created by trickster spirits to lead them astray. Interestingly, the witch's road was not exclusively European, though that's where much of the documented folklore originates. Similar concepts existed in cultures around the world: the Dreamtime tracks of Aboriginal Australians, the spirit roads of various indigenous American peoples, the invisible paths walked by shamans in Siberia. Each culture had its own name, its own specific practices and beliefs, but the underlying concept remained remarkably consistent. There exists a way of moving through the world that transcends ordinary space, that connects sacred sites and allows communication with spirits, that serves both as a physical route and a spiritual discipline. While the term witch's road comes primarily from European folklore, anthropologists and folklorists have noted parallel concepts in cultures worldwide: spirit paths, dream roads, and shamanic routes that served similar functions of connecting sacred spaces and facilitating otherworldly journeys, suggesting this may be a universal human spiritual experience expressed through different cultural frameworks. This universality suggests something profound. Perhaps the witch's road isn't a cultural invention at all, but a discovery, a recognition of something that exists independently of human belief, woven into the fabric of reality itself. As you settle deeper into rest now, imagine that you're standing at a crossroads on the witch's road. 4 paths stretch out before you, each leading to different realms of knowledge and experience. You don't have to choose tonight. The crossroads will still be here tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. The road is patient. It has waited for millennia. It can wait for you to be ready. And perhaps as you drift towards sleep, you'll find yourself walking one of those paths in your dreams, discovering what has always been there, waiting to be found. Our journey continues, and as we walk, we begin to understand that the witch's road is not merely a path through space or time, but a path through consciousness itself. Each step is both a physical movement and a transformation of the self. One of the most intriguing aspects of the road is the phenomenon of companions who appear and disappear. Not the familiar spirits we've spoken of, but human, or seemingly human, fellow travelers who walk alongside you for a portion of your journey, share crucial information or assistance, and then vanish as mysteriously as they arrived. Many accounts in witch folklore describe the experience of mysterious companions on the witch's road, travelers who appear exactly when needed, offer guidance or aid, share food or shelter, and then disappear without trace, leading many to believe these were either spirits in human guise, witches who had died but still walked the road, or projections of one's own higher wisdom taking form to provide necessary assistance. Some practitioners believe these companions were aspects of themselves from parallel paths not taken, or future versions of themselves reaching back through time to offer help at a crucial moment. The comfort of these encounters often stayed with travelers long after the mysterious companion had faded into the mist, a reminder that on the witch's road, you are never truly alone. The road had its own language, quite literally. Beyond the songs and the symbolic meanings, there was a vocabulary used by those who walked the path, words and phrases that might sound ordinary to outsiders but carried layered meanings to the initiated. When one witch told another to walk well or spoke of clear roads, these weren't mere pleasantries but encoded information about spiritual conditions, safety, and the state of the path. A specialized vocabulary developed among roadwalkers, seemingly mundane phrases that carried hidden meanings about spiritual conditions, dangers, or opportunities along the path, allowing practitioners to communicate openly about their craft even in the presence of those who might persecute them, with terms like good walking weather indicating favorable spiritual conditions or the old stone is warm tonight, signaling that a particular sacred site was especially accessible. This coded language extended into everyday life, allowing witches to recognize each other and share information while avoiding detection during dangerous times. A traveler arriving in a new village might ask seemingly innocent questions about local landmarks or weather patterns, and the answers would tell them everything they needed to know about whether it was safe to identify themselves, whether there were others of the craft nearby, and where they might find the local entrance to the road. Offerings were an essential part of road walking, and what you left behind mattered as much as what you carried with you. At certain points along the path, natural shrines, ancient trees, crossroads, wells, practitioners would leave small gifts. These might be physical items like coins, herbs, or food, but they could also be offerings of song, of prayer, of one's own energy or intention. The practice of leaving offerings along the witch's road was considered essential: bread for hungry spirits, coins at crossroads for Hecate, flowers at sacred wells, libations of wine or milk poured onto the earth, and the failure to make appropriate offerings could result in the road becoming hostile or simply refusing to reveal itself on future journeys. But offerings weren't just about appeasement or payment, they were about relationship, about acknowledging that the road and its inhabitants were worthy of respect and gratitude. The most powerful offerings, according to the old teachings, were personal sacrifices, giving up something you valued, whether that was time, comfort, or a cherished belief that no longer served your growth. The relationship between the witch's road and the dead is deep and complex. Many traditions held that the newly dead would walk the road on their way to the afterlife, and that during certain times, especially during Samhain and the days immediately following someone's death, the road became a bridge between the worlds of the living and the dead. Practitioners might walk the road specifically to commune with deceased loved ones or to guide confused spirits to their proper rest. It was widely believed across European traditions that the witch's road served as a passage for the newly deceased, and that witches could walk the road during liminal times to communicate with the dead, help guide lost souls, or receive wisdom from ancestral spirits, making the road not just a path for the living but a bridge between all states of existence. Some practitioners spoke of encountering great processions of the dead along certain stretches of the road, especially on the nights when the veil was thinnest. These weren't frightening encounters, they would say, but rather beautiful and solemn, hundreds of spirits walking together, some recently past and others ancient beyond memory, all traveling the road toward whatever comes next. The living would step aside respectfully, perhaps join in their songs for a while, and then continue on their own journey, reminded that death is not an ending but another path. Dreams and the witch's road were intimately connected. In fact, many practitioners believed that everyone walks the road in their dreams, whether they remember it or not. The difference between an ordinary person and a trained witch was simply that the witch walked consciously, remembering the journey upon waking, and able to navigate deliberately rather than drifting wherever the currents of sleep might carry them. Some traditions taught that mastery of dream walking was the first step to physically walking the witch's road, that you must first learn to navigate the road in dreams before your feet could find it in waking life, as the skills of consciousness required for both were essentially the same. Dream journals were often kept by apprentices, recording their nighttime journeys along the road, noting landmarks and encounters, gradually building up a map of the territory that existed between sleeping and waking. Over time, these dream walks became more vivid and controllable, until the boundary between dreaming the road and walking it physically became thin and permeable. There were dangers on the road that we haven't yet spoken of, not just the physical perils or the risk of becoming lost, but more subtle threats. One could encounter entities that fed on energy, that would drain a careless traveler's vitality or cloud their mind. There were places along the path where reality had worn thin in unhealthy ways, creating weak spots where negative energies could seep through. And there was always the danger of pride, of believing you had mastered the road when in fact it had merely been generous with you. The folklore warns of specific hazards along the witch's road: energy vampires, both spiritual and occasionally corporeal, cursed sections where old magical workings had gone wrong and left the area spiritually polluted, and most dangerous of all, the phenomenon of road sickness, where a traveler became so obsessed with walking the path that they neglected their physical body and mundane responsibilities, eventually wasting away. Road sickness was particularly insidious because it disguised itself as spiritual devotion. The afflicted person would seem deeply committed to their practice, spending more and more time walking the road, but their physical health would decline, their relationships would suffer, and their magic would paradoxically become less effective rather than more so. The wise elders taught that the witch's road was meant to be walked in balance with ordinary life, not as an escape from it. The tools and items carried by roadwalkers often took on their own power over time. A staff that had walked the road with you for years absorbed the energy of your journeys, becoming more than mere wood. It became a companion, a repository of memory, an extension of your will. The knife you carried wasn't just for cutting herbs but had tasted the air of the other world, had been present at your crossroads decisions, had defended you against spiritual threats. Many practitioners spoke of their road tools as alive in their own way, imbued with consciousness through years of shared experience. According to tradition, tools regularly carried on the witch's road, staffs, knives, cloaks, bags, would gradually become enchanted through repeated exposure to the path's energies, eventually developing their own subtle awareness and becoming powerful magical items in their own right, sometimes being passed down through generations as precious heirlooms that carried accumulated power and knowledge. Some of these tools were said to eventually become so saturated with road magic that they could help guide even a novice traveler, or that they would refuse to work for someone who used them for harmful purposes, having developed something like a conscience through their long service. The concept of road names or traveling names was important in many traditions. Your everyday name, the one given to you at birth, wasn't necessarily the name you used on the witch's road. Many practitioners took or were given a second name, one that resonated with their magical nature or that had been revealed to them through vision or initiation. Practitioners often took or received a special name for use on the witch's road, sometimes chosen, sometimes given by a teacher, sometimes revealed through vision, and this name held power because it resonated with their deepest magical nature, and using one's mundane name on the road could create unwanted connections between one's ordinary and magical lives. Your road name was precious, not shared lightly, for to know someone's true name on the road was to have a certain power regarding them, a deep connection that implied trust and intimacy. Some witches went decades without revealing their road name to anyone except their closest magical companions. Others changed their road name periodically, as they grew and transformed, each name marking a different phase of their journey. And then there was the ultimate mystery that all road walkers eventually contemplated: where does the road ultimately lead? Does it have an ending, a final destination, or does it wind on forever through infinite realms? Some believed the road was circular, that if you walked far enough and deep enough, you would eventually return to your starting point, transformed by the journey into someone new. Others believed the road eventually led to the source of all magic, to the heart of the mystery itself, though what exactly that meant, no one could quite articulate. Perhaps the destination is different for each traveler. Perhaps the road leads exactly where you need to go, and no two journeys are the same. Or perhaps, and this is what many of the oldest teachings suggested, the road itself is the destination, the walking itself is the point, and arriving anywhere is less important than the transformation that occurs with each step. Rest now in this knowing. You've walked far tonight, through story and symbol, through the accumulated wisdom of countless travelers who came before. The road is imprinted on your consciousness now, and even as you drift towards sleep, part of you continues walking, exploring, discovering. Tomorrow when you wake, you may not remember the details of where you traveled, but something will have shifted within you, some small seed of understanding planted that will grow in its own time. Let us walk on together, for there is more to discover. The Witch's Road has been many things to many people across the ages, and each layer of understanding reveals another beneath it, like peeling back the petals of an endless flower. In some traditions, the road was seen as a teacher more powerful than any human mentor could be. You could study with the wisest witch in the land, learn every spell and technique they had to offer, but until you walked the road yourself, your education remained incomplete. The road taught things that couldn't be transmitted through words or demonstrations. It taught through direct experience, through challenge and revelation, through the profound encounters that could only happen in that liminal space between worlds. Many teaching traditions held that a witch's true education came not from human teachers but from the witch's road itself, that the path would present exactly the lessons each traveler needed at exactly the right time, sometimes through obvious teaching moments but more often through subtle experiences whose meaning only became clear months or years later. Apprentices were often sent to walk a particular section of the road as their final test, not because their teacher wanted to evaluate them, but because the road itself would reveal whether they were ready. Those who returned had a different quality to their presence, a depth that came from having been tested by something far older and wiser than any living person. The relationship between the Witch's Road and specific landscapes was profound. The road didn't simply pass through forests and fields. It was intimately connected to the character and spirit of each place it traversed. In mountainous regions, the road took on qualities of elevation and vision, places where you could see far but where the air was thin and breathing required effort, metaphors made physical. In lowlands and valleys, the road became about depth and shadow, about what grows in dark, fertile places. Near the sea, the road absorbed the rhythm of tides, the road's relationship with the ocean teaching about cycles, about things that ebb and flow, about the deep mysteries that lie beneath surfaces. Different geographical features along the Witch's Road were believed to impart different types of magical knowledge. Coastal sections taught water magic and transformation, mountain paths taught perseverance and far-seeing, forest roads taught the language of growing things and the wisdom of patience, while roads through caves and underground passages taught shadow work and the confrontation of one's deepest fears. Practitioners would sometimes travel great distances to walk specific sections of the road known for teaching particular skills or facilitating certain types of spiritual development. There was also the phenomenon of what some traditions called road fever, not the road sickness we spoke of earlier, but something different. This was a sudden, overwhelming urge to walk the road, coming upon you without warning, often at inconvenient times. You might be in the middle of daily tasks when suddenly the call would come, so strong you could barely resist it. Experienced practitioners learned to recognize this as the road summoning them for a specific purpose. Perhaps there was something they needed to witness, someone they needed to meet, or a lesson waiting that couldn't be delayed. Some practitioners experienced what was called the road's calling, a sudden, irresistible compulsion to walk the path at a specific time, often disrupting their daily lives. But those who ignored such callings repeatedly found that the road would eventually refuse them access, as if the path itself had decided they were not serious enough in their commitment. The calling was considered sacred, a sign that you were needed or that something significant awaited you. To ignore it without good reason was to risk offending the road itself, though legitimate obligations, caring for children, tending to the ill, were understood and respected. The road was demanding but not cruel. Interesting patterns emerged regarding gender and the road. While both men and women walked the witch's road throughout history, different traditions had different perspectives on this. Some held that women had a natural advantage in road walking because of their connection to lunar cycles and their role as life-bearers, which made them inherently attuned to the mysteries of thresholds and transformation. Others believed gender was irrelevant on the road, that the path recognized only the sincerity of the seeker and the strength of their will. Historical records and folklore suggest that while both men and women walked the witch's road, women were often considered to have a particular affinity for the path, possibly because the dangerous social position of female magical practitioners meant they relied more heavily on the road's protection and lessons, developing deeper relationships with its mysteries out of necessity. What's clear from the folklore is that many of the most renowned road walkers in legend were women, the wise women who could traverse great distances overnight, the healers who seemed to know exactly when they were needed miles away, the seers who walked between worlds with practiced ease. The road had its own holidays, its own festival times that didn't always align with the better-known Sabbats. There were nights when road walkers from across regions would feel drawn to particular gathering places, arriving to find dozens or even hundreds of others there, none having explicitly arranged the meeting. These spontaneous gatherings were times of great celebration and knowledge exchange, when practitioners who normally worked in isolation could connect with their broader community. At these gatherings, you might witness dances that had been performed on the road for centuries, hear songs in languages that had otherwise died out, or participate in group rituals of startling power. According to tradition, the witch's road would occasionally summon large gatherings of practitioners to specific locations, using the mysterious calling to bring together witches who needed to meet, share knowledge, or work collective magic, and these gatherings would disperse before dawn, with participants often finding that they'd gained exactly the information or connections they needed for the next phase of their work. These spontaneous convocations were seen as evidence of the road's consciousness, its ability to perceive patterns and needs across the entire network of walkers and to weave them together in purposeful ways. The concept of road debt was important in many traditions. If the road gave you something, protection, knowledge, a crucial encounter, you incurred a debt that needed to be repaid. This repayment might take many forms: helping another traveler in need, leaving a particularly generous offering, teaching what you'd learned to someone ready to hear it, or performing some service for the spirits of the path. The debt wasn't onerous or punitive, it was simply part of the reciprocal relationship that sustained the road. Practitioners understood that walking the witch's road created obligations. What was received must eventually be given back in some form, and failure to honor these debts could result in the road withdrawing its gifts or refusing access altogether, though the repayment need not be immediate, and the road was generally patient with those who demonstrated good faith. Some practitioners spent years walking the road, accumulating debts of knowledge and protection, and then spent their later years paying those debts forward by teaching, by serving as guides, or by maintaining and protecting sections of the path for future generations. Maps of the witch's road existed, though they were strange things, not the neat, precise cartography of the mundane world, but fluid, personal, sometimes contradictory. What one person mapped as a straight path through a forest, another might show as a spiraling journey through multiple layers of reality. Some maps were literal, drawn on paper or carved into wood. Others were songs, where each verse described a different section of the journey. Still others were dances, with each movement corresponding to a portion of the path. The maps of the Witch's Road were highly personal and often impossible for others to follow, as they charted not just physical or even spiritual geography but the interior landscape of the mapper, their fears, hopes, and transformations, meaning that one witch's map might be completely useless to another, or might even be dangerous if followed without understanding the consciousness that created it. The most useful maps were those shared orally, teacher to student, with extensive explanation and context. These living maps could adapt to the listener, with the teacher sensing which details to emphasize or omit based on the student's particular nature and needs. There were also darker stories associated with the road, tales of cursed travelers or haunted sections where terrible things had occurred. Like any ancient pathway, the Witch's Road had witnessed tragedy and malice alongside all its beauty and wisdom. Some stretches were said to be haunted by the ghosts of witches who had been caught and killed, their spirits unable or unwilling to move on, forever walking the road they loved. Other sections were avoided because powerful practitioners had worked harmful magic there, leaving residues of negative energy that persisted for generations. The folklore contains warnings about cursed or corrupted sections of the Witch's Road, places where tragic deaths, betrayals, or malicious magic had left permanent scars on the path, creating areas that could harm unwary travelers, drain their power, or trap them in nightmarish loops until they learned to recognize and break the pattern. These dangerous areas weren't necessarily evil. Many were simply wounded, places where the fabric of the road had been torn and had healed imperfectly, leaving scars that ached. Skilled practitioners sometimes undertook the dangerous work of healing these corrupted sections, cleansing and reconsecrating the path, though such work required immense skill and often came at considerable personal cost. And then there's the question that perhaps you've been wondering: does the Witch's Road still exist today? In our modern world of satellites and GPS, of electric lights that banish the darkness, of rational explanations for everything, can the old path still be found? The folklore gives us a clear answer: the road never left. It's still there, winding through the spaces between, waiting for those who remember how to look. The lights of cities haven't dimmed it, they simply make it harder for distracted eyes to see. The modern world hasn't destroyed the road, it's only made humans forget that such things exist. But forgetting doesn't unmake reality. The Witch's Road endures, patient and eternal, and in every generation there are those who find it again, who walk between the worlds, who remember the old ways and teach them anew to those ready to learn. As you rest here, breathing slowly, sinking deeper into peaceful darkness, know that the road is always available to you. Whether you walk it in dreams or in waking, whether you find it in meditation or in the wild places that still exist, whether you approach it through study and practice or stumble upon it unexpectedly, the path is there. It has always been there. It will always be there. And perhaps, in ways you haven't yet recognized, you've been walking it all along. As we continue deeper into the night and deeper into the mysteries, let us explore some of the more subtle aspects of the Witch's Road, the small details that reveal the great truths, the quiet moments that transform everything. One fascinating aspect of road lore involves the concept of road sight, a particular form of second sight that developed in those who walked the path regularly. This wasn't simply the ability to see spirits or to perceive auras, though it might include those things. Road sight was more specific. It was the ability to perceive the Witch's Road itself even when not actively walking it, to see it overlaid on the mundane landscape as you went about your daily life. Extended practice of walking the Witch's Road was said to develop a special form of perception called road sight, allowing practitioners to perceive the path's presence in their everyday lives, seeing the shimmer of its energy crossing through a modern shopping center, recognizing where it passed beneath highways, or noticing when they accidentally stepped onto it during mundane activities and understanding why they suddenly felt different or why time seemed to skip. Those with developed road sight reported that the world became doubled, layered. You could navigate ordinary reality perfectly well while simultaneously aware of the magical geography beneath and through it. This double vision was disorienting at first but eventually became natural, even comforting, a constant reminder that the world was more than it appeared. The role of storytelling in preserving and transmitting road knowledge cannot be overstated. Before literacy was widespread, and even after among practitioners who valued oral tradition, stories were how the knowledge of the road was kept alive. But these weren't just entertaining tales, they were mnemonic devices, encoded teachings, maps disguised as narratives. A story about a witch who met three strangers at a crossroads might actually be instructions for a specific ritual. A tale of a journey through an enchanted forest could be a detailed description of trance states and how to navigate them. The stories of the Witch's Road served as encoded teaching tools, fairy tales and folk legends that seemed like simple entertainment but actually contained precise instructions for rituals, descriptions of trance states, warnings about specific dangers, and maps of spiritual territory, with details that only became clear once you had enough experience to decode them. Apprentices might hear the same story dozens of times over years, and each telling would reveal new layers as their understanding deepened. What seemed like a pointless detail when you first heard it, the color of a character's cloak, the number of steps they took, might suddenly illuminate an entire practice once you'd gained the experience to understand the symbolism. There were also specialized roles among those who walked the road regularly. Not everyone who used the path had the same purpose or function. Some were primarily healers, using the road to travel quickly to those in need or to access special herbs and energies available only in certain places. Others were seers, using the road's liminal nature to enhance their divination and prophecy. Still others were guardians, taking responsibility for maintaining and protecting certain sections of the path. Within the community of roadwalkers, specialized roles emerged: the pathkeepers who maintained and protected specific sections, the lantern-bearers who guided less experienced travelers, the bridgers who specialized in helping the dead cross over, the harvesters who gathered rare spiritual herbs and energies found only along the path, and the lore-keepers who memorized and transmitted the accumulated wisdom through story and song. These roles weren't necessarily exclusive. One person might fulfill multiple functions, but they represented different callings, different ways of being in relationship with the road. The specializations developed naturally based on a person's gifts and inclinations, the road itself seeming to recognize what each walker had to offer and guiding them toward their appropriate role. The interaction between the Witch's Road and other liminal spaces is particularly interesting. Doors, gateways, bridges, these threshold places in the mundane world often connected more directly to the road. Many practitioners reported that they could access the Witch's Road most easily from these in-between places. A doorway left slightly ajar at midnight, a bridge over moving water at dawn, a gateway that marked the boundary between cultivated land and wilderness, these were natural entry points. Traditional lore held that certain types of thresholds in the physical world, particularly bridges over water, doorways between old buildings, cemetery gates, and boundaries between cultivated fields and wild forests, served as easier access points to the Witch's Road, requiring less ritual or trance work to cross over because they already existed in a liminal state between one thing and another. Some practitioners maintained relationships with specific threshold places, visiting them regularly, leaving offerings, treating them as portals they had permission to use. Over time, these personal portals became even more accessible, the boundary thinning through repeated use until stepping onto the road became as simple as stepping through a familiar door. The connection between the Witch's Road and plant consciousness deserves deeper exploration. We've mentioned the sacred trees and plants that bordered the path, but the relationship goes further than that. Many practitioners believed that plants themselves walked a version of the road, that their roots extended into the same otherworldly territory that human witches accessed through trance and ritual. When you ingested certain plants, particularly those used for spiritual purposes, you weren't just altering your brain chemistry, you were accepting an invitation from the plant to walk its road, to see the world from its ancient, rooted perspective. Practitioners developed deep relationships with specific plants along the witch's road, understanding that plants possess their own form of consciousness and could serve as allies, teachers, and guides, with some traditions holding that certain plants, particularly mugwort, wormwood, and vervain, could perceive the road more clearly than humans, and consuming them or carrying them allowed one to see through the plant's awareness. This plant partnership magic was considered advanced work, requiring years of study and relationship building. You couldn't simply grab a plant and expect it to share its knowledge. You had to court it, learn its nature, prove yourself worthy of its trust. The most skilled practitioners could communicate with plants along the road, receiving warnings, guidance, and healing knowledge directly from the green world. Time marking along the road was done differently than in the mundane world. Clocks and calendars were useless there, and attempting to impose that kind of rigid measurement on the road was both futile and disrespectful. Instead, time was marked by natural cycles and personal milestones. How long had you been walking? Long enough to see 3 moonrises. Long enough for your feet to ache and then stop aching. Long enough for the questions you carried to transform into different questions entirely. Rather than hours and minutes, roadwalkers measured time by experiences, transformations, and natural cycles. A journey might last 3 thresholds, meaning 3 significant boundary crossings, or from doubt to clarity, meaning however long it took to resolve a particular spiritual question, with the understanding that clock time and road time bore little relation to each other. You might walk all night on the road and return to find that only minutes had passed in the mundane world, or you might feel you'd been gone for an hour only to discover that dawn was breaking and you'd been absent all night. This temporal fluidity was one of the road's mysteries, neither random nor fully predictable, somehow responsive to need and intention in ways that defied rational explanation. The concept of road memory was recognized by most traditions, the idea that the road itself remembered everything that had ever happened along it, every walker who had passed, every word spoken, every ritual performed. This vast memory was accessible to those who knew how to tap into it, though doing so required skill and often came with a cost. You might seek the road's memory to learn an ancient technique, to understand what had happened in a place, or to connect with the wisdom of long-dead practitioners. The witch's road was believed to possess memory, a living record of everyone who had ever walked it and everything that had ever occurred along its length, and skilled practitioners could tap into this vast archive through deep meditation or trance, though accessing road memory often came with the risk of becoming temporarily lost in the past or overwhelmed by the flood of information from countless lifetimes. Some practitioners described road memory as feeling like ancestral memory, as if they were remembering their own past lives, though the experiences belonged to strangers who had walked the path centuries before. Others experienced it more like reading a book written directly into their consciousness, information arriving whole and complete rather than in linear narrative form. The phenomena of road twins or shadow walkers appeared in many traditions, the experience of encountering someone on the road who seemed to mirror you in uncanny ways. They might look like you, or share your mannerisms, or speak your thoughts before you voiced them. These encounters were generally considered powerful teaching moments, opportunities to see yourself reflected and to understand aspects of your nature that had been hidden. Some interpretations suggested these were literal other versions of yourself from parallel paths of possibility. Others believed they were projections created by the road itself as a form of instruction. Many roadwalkers reported the phenomenon of encountering twins or mirrors on the path. Individuals who seemed to be alternative versions of themselves, making different choices, walking different routes, and these encounters were believed to be glimpses of parallel possibilities, other lives one might have lived, serving both as teaching tools and as reminders that every choice made on the road created branches and possibilities in ways that echoed through multiple realities. These encounters were often profound and sometimes disturbing, raising questions about identity, choice, and the nature of self. If you met yourself on the road and your other self had chosen differently at some crucial juncture, which version was the real you? The answer most traditions offered was that both were real, all versions were real, and the witch's road existed partially outside of linear time precisely so these multiplicities could coexist and occasionally meet. The practice of walking for another was common in some traditions, undertaking a journey on the witch's road on behalf of someone else who could not walk it themselves. You might walk for someone who was ill, seeking healing knowledge or energy. You might walk for someone who had died, helping to guide their spirit. You might walk for your community, seeking wisdom about challenges they faced or protection against threats. Experienced practitioners could walk the witch's road as proxies for others, carrying another's question or need, seeking healing or answers on their behalf, though this practice required great skill as the walker had to maintain their own integrity while simultaneously holding space for another's journey, and there were risks of becoming entangled with the other person's fate or taking on burdens that weren't meant for them. Walking for another was considered a sacred trust, not undertaken lightly. The person you walked for would often give you something to carry: a lock of hair, a personal object, a written question, something that maintained the connection between their consciousness and your journey. Upon your return, you would share what you'd learned or received, though sometimes the knowledge or healing transferred automatically, the person feeling the effects before you even returned to tell them what had happened. As you sink deeper into rest, imagine that all these threads of story and wisdom are weaving themselves into a map within you, a map written not on paper but on your soul. Every fact, every image, every moment of this journey is becoming part of your own relationship with mystery, with magic, with the unseen paths that wind through the world. The Witch's Road is closer than you think. Perhaps it's beneath your feet right now, perhaps you're walking it in this very moment of listening and dreaming. Our journey continues through the night, and as we walk, we discover that the Witch's Road holds even more secrets, more layers of meaning that reveal themselves only to the patient and persistent seeker. One aspect of the road that appears in folklore across many regions is the phenomenon of road gifts, unexpected blessings or powers that the road itself would sometimes bestow upon travelers. These weren't things you could ask for or earn through any conscious effort. They were spontaneous offerings from the path itself, given when the road deemed you ready or in need. A traveler might suddenly discover they could understand the language of birds, or find that their healing touch had become more powerful, or realize they could now perceive things hidden from normal sight. According to widespread tradition, the Witch's Road would occasionally bestow spontaneous gifts upon travelers, new abilities, unexpected knowledge, or magical objects that simply appeared in one's pocket or bag, and these gifts were always perfectly suited to the recipient's nature and needs, though their purpose might not become clear until much later, sometimes years after receiving them. The folklore emphasizes that these gifts couldn't be requested or pursued. Attempting to manipulate the road into giving you something specific would ensure you received nothing at all. The road gave what it wanted to give, when it wanted to give it, and the gifts always came with their own implicit instructions for use, understood intuitively rather than explained. The relationship between weather and emotion on the Witch's Road went both ways. We've discussed how the road created its own weather, but your emotional state could also influence the environment around you. A traveler in deep grief might find the road shrouded in mist and drizzle, while someone experiencing joy could walk through sudden sunlight even in the depths of night. This responsiveness wasn't random. It was part of how the road communicated, how it mirrored your inner state back to you so you could see it more clearly and work with it more consciously. The Witch's Road was believed to be emotionally responsive, manifesting weather and atmospheric conditions that reflected the traveler's inner emotional state, creating a feedback loop where external conditions helped the traveler recognize and process their own feelings, with the road essentially serving as a giant mirror for one's psychological and spiritual condition. Experienced walkers learn to use this responsiveness deliberately, working with their emotions rather than suppressing them, allowing the road to externalize what they were feeling so they could examine it, understand it, and ultimately transform it. A practitioner struggling with fear might walk until the road manifested their fear as a storm, then stand in that storm and face it directly, finding that as they came to terms with the fear internally, the weather gradually cleared. The concept of road wounds was recognized by most traditions, injuries sustained on the Witch's Road that might not be physical but were nonetheless real and sometimes more serious than mundane hurts. You might return from a journey with your body intact but your spirit bruised, your confidence shaken, your certainty undermined. These wounds required their own kind of healing, often involving returning to the road to work through whatever had harmed you. Practitioners recognized that injuries sustained on the Witch's Road, though not always physical, were profoundly real. One could return with trauma to the spirit, energetic damage, or psychological wounds that manifested as nightmares, anxiety, or a temporary loss of magical ability, and healing these road wounds often required ritual work, the support of more experienced practitioners, or sometimes a return to the road itself to face whatever had caused the injury. Some road wounds came from encounters with hostile entities, others from confronting aspects of yourself you weren't ready to face, and still others from witnessing things on the road that human consciousness wasn't really built to comprehend. The healing process was gradual and couldn't be rushed. You had to honor the wound, acknowledge what had happened, and slowly rebuild your relationship with the road and with the parts of yourself that had been damaged. Interestingly, some traditions spoke of the road having moods or even a personality. This wasn't meant metaphorically. Practitioners genuinely believed that the witch's road possessed some form of consciousness or will. On some nights, the road felt welcoming, almost eager to have you walk it. On others, it felt distant or closed, and attempting to force your way onto it during such times was both difficult and unwise. Some attributed these moods to the collective consciousness of all who had ever walked the road. Others believed the path itself was a living entity, perhaps even a deity in its own right. Many traditions personified the witch's road as a conscious being with moods, preferences, and will, sometimes called the Lady of the Path or the Old Walker, and practitioners would develop personal relationships with this entity, leaving it offerings, speaking to it directly, and learning to sense its disposition before attempting to walk, as the road's cooperation made journeys infinitely safer and more productive. In some traditions, initiates would undergo a ritual marriage with the road, pledging themselves to it as they might pledge themselves to a deity or a human partner. This wasn't undertaken lightly. It represented a lifelong commitment to walking, to serving the road's purposes, to being available when called. But those who made this commitment spoke of receiving the road's protection and guidance in ways that others could not access, a deep intimacy with the path that went beyond mere familiarity. The practice of road fasting appeared in several traditions, abstaining from food for a period before and during a journey on the witch's road. This wasn't about mortification or punishment, but about achieving a particular state of consciousness. An empty belly made you lighter, more sensitive to subtle energies, less tethered to physical reality. Many practitioners fasted before important journeys, consuming only water or perhaps herbal teas, finding that this enhanced their perception and made it easier to slip between worlds. Traditions across cultures practiced some form of fasting before walking the witch's road, abstaining from food, alcohol, sexual activity, or speech, not as punishment but as a method of achieving the altered state necessary for deep road work, with the understanding that reducing physical distractions and pleasures made one more receptive to spiritual experiences and made the boundary between worlds more permeable. The duration and strictness of the fast varied depending on the journey's purpose. A brief walk might require only skipping one meal, while preparing for a major working could involve days of careful fasting, gradually reducing food intake to achieve the desired state of consciousness. Breaking the fast after returning was itself a ritual, a way of re-anchoring yourself in physical reality, often done with specific foods that were considered grounding: bread, salt, honey, milk. The phenomenon of road languages is fascinating. The observation that communication on the witch's road sometimes transcended normal linguistic barriers. Two practitioners who shared no common language in the mundane world might find they could understand each other perfectly when walking the road. Some attributed this to telepathy or direct mind-to-mind communication. Others believed the road itself translated, or that in that liminal space, you were speaking soul to soul rather than through the imperfect medium of words. Many accounts describe experiencing universal comprehension on the witch's road, understanding speakers of unknown languages, communicating with spirits who never possessed human speech, and even interpreting the language of natural phenomena like wind, water, or stone, suggesting that the road existed at a level of reality where meaning transferred directly without requiring linguistic translation. This universal communication extended beyond human language to encompass what might be called the grammar of magic itself. Practitioners from different traditions, working with entirely different symbol systems and methodologies, found common ground on the road because they were accessing something beneath the surface variations, something fundamental about how magic and consciousness interact. There were certain prohibitions associated with the witch's road, things you absolutely should not do while walking. These varied somewhat between traditions, but common ones included: never running on the road unless in genuine danger, as rushing showed disrespect; never loudly calling someone's mundane name, as this could attract unwanted attention; never urinating or defecating directly on the path, as this was seen as profound desecration; never harming the plants or animals you encountered without absolute necessity; and never, ever looking back over your shoulder without strong reason, as this could trap you in the past or draw the attention of things best left unnoticed. Strict prohibitions governed behavior on the Witch's Road, such as never whistling after midnight, never picking flowers growing directly on the path, never stepping over a sleeping traveler, never refusing aid to someone in genuine need, and never speaking certain names aloud, with violations ranging from simply offending the road to attracting dangerous attention or losing one's way entirely. These prohibitions weren't arbitrary rules but practical wisdom accumulated over centuries. Each one existed because someone somewhere had violated it and suffered consequences. The prohibitions were teaching tools in themselves, fostering the mindfulness and respect necessary for safe travel. An apprentice learning these rules was also learning to walk with awareness, to think before acting, to understand that every action in that liminal space carried weight and meaning. The role of witnesses in road walking was interesting. Some traditions held that having someone witness your departure and return, someone who stood at the threshold and waited for you, made the journey safer, providing an anchor to help you find your way back. This witness would often keep a candle burning through the night, a beacon in both the physical and spiritual worlds. Other traditions believed road walking should be entirely solitary and secret, with no one knowing you had gone. Both approaches had their merits and their dangers. Some traditions required a trusted witness to mark a traveler's departure on the Witch's Road and maintain vigil until their return, keeping candles lit, holding focused intention for safe passage, and serving as an anchor to physical reality, while other traditions insisted on complete secrecy, believing that having witnesses could create energetic ties that interfered with the journey or put the witness at risk of being drawn unwillingly into the traveler's experiences. The choice between witnessed and solitary journeys often depended on the purpose of the walk and the experience level of the practitioner. Novices usually benefited from witnesses, while advanced practitioners often worked alone. But even experienced walkers sometimes appreciated having a trusted person hold space for them during particularly challenging or dangerous workings. The connection between the Witch's Road and stars, beyond simple navigation, was profound in many traditions. Certain stars or constellations were believed to be deeply linked to the road. They weren't just points of light to steer by but actual parts of the road itself, or perhaps termini where the earthly road connected to celestial paths. Some practitioners spoke of walking not just across the landscape but between earth and sky, traversing distances that span both horizontal and vertical dimensions. Various traditions taught that the Witch's Road connected to celestial pathways, with certain stars serving as destinations or waypoints, and during particular astronomical alignments, it was believed possible to walk from Earth to the stars themselves, or at least to access stellar energies and consciousness in ways not normally available, bringing back knowledge and power from those vast distances. These stellar journeys were considered the most advanced and dangerous workings a practitioner could undertake. The return to Earth could be difficult, disorienting, with the traveler's consciousness stretched so far that it struggled to compress itself back into a single human perspective. Those who successfully completed stellar roadwalks were forever changed, carrying something of that vast perspective with them, seeing earthly concerns from a distance that could be both enlightening and alienating. Let yourself drift now, floating on these words and images like a leaf on a gentle stream. The Witch's Road is not separate from this moment, not distant or inaccessible. It flows through this very breath you're taking, through the darkness behind your closed eyes, through the space between heartbeats. You are always closer to the road than you think, always one small shift in perception away from recognizing what has been there all along. We walk on together through the deepening night, and the mysteries continue to unfold like flowers that bloom only in darkness. There is so much more to discover about the Witch's Road, each detail a key that unlocks another door. The concept of road family was important in many traditions, the understanding that those who regularly walked the Witch's Road developed bonds that transcended ordinary friendship or even blood kinship. These were the people who understood what you'd experienced, who could hear your stories without skepticism or fear, who knew the road's language and its dangers and its beauty. Many practitioners felt closer to their road family than to their biological relatives, for they had shared something profound: journeys between worlds, encounters with mystery, transformations that left them fundamentally changed. Practitioners who regularly walked the Witch's Road often formed deep bonds called road families, relationships that transcended blood ties and were based on shared experiences of the path, mutual understanding of its mysteries, and the trust that comes from having witnessed each other's transformations, with these bonds sometimes lasting across lifetimes, as road family members would recognize each other even if they met in different incarnations. These relationships had their own protocols and commitments. You didn't abandon a member of your road family in times of trouble. You shared resources, knowledge, and protection. If one of your road family was walking a dangerous section of the path, you might walk parallel to them in your own journeys, lending your energy and intention to their safety even if you weren't physically together. The practice of leaving road marks for other travelers was common, small signs and symbols that conveyed information to those who could read them. A particular arrangement of stones might warn of danger ahead. A tied bundle of herbs could indicate a safe place to rest nearby. Scratches on a tree trunk might spell out a message in a symbolic alphabet known only to initiates. These marks served practical purposes but also created a sense of community and continuity, reminding each solitary walker that others had passed this way before and would pass this way again. A complex system of trail markers developed among roadwalkers, symbols carved into trees, stones arranged in specific patterns, bundles of herbs hung in particular ways, that conveyed detailed information about spiritual conditions, physical dangers, available resources, or important events that other travelers should know about, creating an ongoing conversation between practitioners who might never meet face to face. The marks were subtle enough that mundane travelers would pass them without notice, but to initiated eyes they stood out clearly. Learning to read road marks was part of every apprentice's education, and developing your own marking style was a rite of passage, a way of announcing that you had become a full member of the community of walkers. There were legends of roadmasters practitioners who had achieved such profound connection with the Witch's Road that they could manipulate it, could open new sections or seal off corrupted areas, could guide the path itself rather than simply following where it led. These individuals were rare and often became legendary figures, their deeds remembered in story and song long after they had passed from the mortal world. Some traditions claim that roadmasters never truly died but became part of the road itself, their consciousness merging with its vast awareness, still guiding and protecting travelers from within the path's own essence. Folklore speaks of legendary roadmasters practitioners who achieved such profound unity with the Witch's Road that they gained abilities to reshape sections of the path, create new connections between distant places, heal corrupted areas, or even call the road to locations where it had never run before. Though such mastery was said to require decades of dedicated practice, and often came at the cost of ever fully returning to ordinary life. Stories told of roadmasters who could walk from one end of Europe to the other in a single night, or who could bring two sections of road together so that travelers could step from Scotland directly into Italy without crossing the intervening distance. Whether these tales were literal truth or metaphorical teaching is hard to say, but they represented an ideal that practitioners aspired to: complete harmony with the path, the ability to work with its consciousness as a partner rather than simply as a traveler using its services. The phenomenon of road echoes was recognized in many traditions, the experience of walking a section of the path and suddenly feeling, hearing, or even seeing echoes of previous journeys, your own or others. You might find yourself suddenly remembering a journey you took years ago on this same stretch, the memory so vivid it overlaid your present experience. Or you might perceive ghost-like images of other travelers, past or future, moving through the same space but in different times. Many practitioners reported experiencing road echoes, moments when past and future journeys overlapped with the present, creating a palimpsest effect where multiple walks along the same section became briefly visible to each other, allowing for strange encounters with one's past or future self, or witnessing significant historical events that occurred at that location in other times. These echoes were most common in places where the road had been walked for countless generations, where the accumulated energy of so many journeys had saturated the path. Some sections of the road were so thick with echoes that walking them became like moving through a crowd, though the other figures were translucent and unaware of your presence. Skilled practitioners learned to navigate these echo-heavy areas, using the overlapping time streams to gather information or to send messages to their own past or future selves. The relationship between the witch's road and personal transformation was perhaps its most fundamental aspect. Walking the road wasn't a neutral activity, it changed you. Every journey stripped away something false, revealed something true, cracked open something that had been sealed. This transformative power was why the road was both sought after and feared. Many people lived their entire lives avoiding transformation, clinging to familiar patterns even when those patterns no longer served them. To walk the witch's road was to accept that you would not return as the same person who left. The witch's road served fundamentally as an engine of personal transformation, each journey stripping away false beliefs, revealing hidden aspects of self, confronting the walker with their shadows and their lights, and practitioners understood that you could not walk the road regularly without being continually transformed, which was precisely why some people walked it compulsively while others, after a single journey, chose never to walk it again. The transformations weren't always comfortable. Sometimes the road showed you things about yourself that you'd spent years avoiding. Sometimes it demanded that you release relationships, beliefs, or identities that you'd thought were essential to who you were. But those who embraced the transformative process found that each death of an old self made room for a truer, more powerful self to emerge. Certain objects became sacred within road-walking traditions, not because they were inherently magical, but because they'd been present on so many journeys that they accumulated power and meaning. A worn pair of boots that had walked 1,000 miles of the road, a cloak that had sheltered you through countless nights, a bag that had carried your tools through years of practice. These items became extensions of yourself, allies in their own right, and other practitioners could feel the road's energy radiating from them. Items regularly carried on the witch's road, particularly footwear, cloaks, staffs, and bags, accumulated such concentrated magical charge through repeated exposure that they became powerful talismans in their own right, often passed down through generations as precious heirlooms, with the understanding that these objects carried not just power but also wisdom and memory from all their previous journeys. When such an object was passed from teacher to student or from parent to child, it wasn't merely a physical gift but a transmission of lineage, a way of connecting the new owner to all the previous walkers who had used it. Some of these objects were said to have become conscious in their own way, choosing their next owner rather than being simply inherited, refusing to work for someone who wasn't suited to carry them. The practice of road silence appeared in several traditions, periods during which practitioners would walk without speaking aloud, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. This wasn't about suffering or deprivation, but about developing a different mode of awareness. When you stopped filling the world with your own voice, you could hear other voices, the whisper of spirits, the songs of plants, the subtle communications that normally went unnoticed beneath the noise of human speech. Many traditions practiced road silence, walking the path without speaking aloud, sometimes for entire journeys lasting days, not from vows of asceticism but as a method of developing deeper listening skills and nonverbal awareness, with the understanding that speech could disturb spiritual presences or prevent the practitioner from perceiving subtle messages from the road itself. During road silence, practitioners communicated through gesture when necessary, but mostly they learned to be comfortable with solitude and stillness. The silence allowed them to hear their own thoughts more clearly, to distinguish between genuine intuition and mental noise, to develop sensitivity to the countless subtle communications happening in every moment. After extended road silence, many practitioners reported that returning to normal speech felt strange, even crude, as if language was an imperfect tool they temporarily transcended. The concept of road seasons existed in some traditions, not the familiar 4 seasons of the calendar, but the internal seasons of a practitioner's relationship with the path. There was the spring of beginning, when everything was new and full of wonder. The summer of confidence, when you walked with sure feet and the road opened easily to you. The autumn of questioning, when what you thought you knew became uncertain. And the winter of emptiness, when the road seemed to withdraw and you walked in faith rather than in sight. These seasons cycled throughout a practitioner's life, sometimes lasting months or years, and understanding which season you were in helped you approach your practice with appropriate expectations. Experienced practitioners recognized cyclical road seasons in their relationship with the path, periods of easy access and revelation alternating with times when the road seemed distant or closed, periods of rapid growth followed by apparent stagnation, and understanding these natural cycles prevented discouragement during difficult phases, with the wisdom that each season had its purpose and that winter's darkness was as necessary as summer's illumination. Trying to force your way through winter by willpower alone usually backfired, making the season last longer or leading to burnout. The wisdom was to honor each season for what it offered, rest during winter, gathering energy for the inevitable return of spring. Some of the deepest learning happened during winter, not through dramatic revelations but through the slow, patient work of integration and reflection. There are also accounts of road lightning, rare moments of sudden, overwhelming illumination that could strike a traveler without warning. This wasn't the gradual revelation that came through patient practice but an instantaneous transformation, a lightning bolt of understanding that left you fundamentally altered in a single moment. These experiences were beyond words, beyond explanation. Those who had experienced road lightning could recognize each other somehow, could see in each other's eyes that they'd been touched by something vast and terrible and beautiful that couldn't be shared, only acknowledged. Rare but transformative experiences of road lightning's sudden, overwhelming spiritual illumination that struck without warning, could permanently alter a practitioner's consciousness, granting instant realization that years of gradual practice might never achieve, though such experiences were unpredictable, couldn't be sought deliberately, and sometimes left the recipient struggling to integrate such intense revelation into their ordinary life. The aftermath of road lightning was often challenging. You had to find a way to live as a person who had experienced something that others couldn't understand or believe. You had to integrate an experience of infinity back into a finite life. Some people who experienced road lightning became powerful teachers, able to guide others towards similar breakthroughs. Others withdrew from the world, finding ordinary life unbearably mundane after touching something so profound. The road didn't seem to care which path you chose afterward. The lightning struck who it struck, and what you did with it was your own responsibility. Breathe deeply now, letting all these stories and teachings settle into your body like seeds planted in fertile soil. You don't need to remember every detail consciously. The knowledge is embedding itself at a deeper level, becoming part of the substrate of your being. The Witch's Road is teaching you even now, as you rest, as you drift towards sleep, as you walk the roads of dream that mirror and connect to the waking path. We approach the completion of our journey tonight, though the true journey, the journey of understanding the Witch's Road, is one that never truly ends. Let us walk these final miles together, gathering the last mysteries into our keeping. One of the most poignant aspects of road lore is the concept of road goodbye, the understanding that sometimes you meet someone on the path, share a brief but profound connection, and then part ways knowing you will never meet again. These encounters were bittersweet, intense in their temporality. You might walk for hours with someone, sharing your deepest truths, learning from each other, and then simply part at a crossroads with a blessing, both of you continuing on your separate ways. The tradition of the road goodbye acknowledged the bittersweet nature of brief but profound encounters on the Witch's Road, meetings that lasted only hours but carried the intimacy of lifelong friendship, followed by partings where both travelers knew they would never meet again, either because their paths led to different destinations or because the road's mysterious nature meant that encounters often happened outside of linear time. These goodbyes were considered sacred moments, neither rushed nor sentimentalized, simply acknowledged with gratitude for what had been shared. Some practitioners kept journals of their road goodbyes, recording what they'd learned from each temporary companion, creating a written memorial to all the brief teachers who had crossed their path. The phenomenon of road calls, sounds that only existed on the Witch's Road and nowhere else in the natural world, was documented in many traditions. These might be the cry of a bird that had been extinct for millennia, or music played on instruments that were never invented, or voices singing in harmonies that human throats couldn't produce. These sounds were considered omens, each carrying its own meaning. Hearing the call of the white stag meant a period of rare opportunity was beginning. The sound of bronze bells indicated the presence of ancient spirits. Laughter like water meant healing was available. Practitioners reported hearing unique sounds that existed only on the Witch's Road, the call of mythical creatures, music from instruments that had never been invented, voices speaking prophecies in dead languages, or sounds that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. And learning to interpret these auditory phenomena became an important skill, as different sounds indicated different spiritual conditions, opportunities, or warnings. Some practitioners developed the ability to produce road calls themselves, using voice or instrument to create sounds that resonated specifically with the path's frequency, allowing them to communicate across great distances or to signal their presence to spirits and other travelers in ways that mundane sound could not. The practice of road weaving appeared in several traditions, the understanding that each journey you took created a thread, and over a lifetime these threads wove together into a pattern that was uniquely yours. Some practitioners could perceive this pattern, seeing it as a visible web of light connecting all the places they'd been, all the encounters they'd had. Advanced practitioners could consciously shape their weaving, choosing which threads to strengthen, which connections to emphasize, creating patterns of power and meaning through the totality of their journeys. Each journey along the Witch's Road was understood to create metaphysical threads or connections between places and people, and over time these threads wove into complex patterns, your road weaving, that represented the unique shape of your magical life and could be perceived by advanced practitioners as visible energy patterns, with particularly beautiful or powerful weavings becoming legendary and sometimes persisting after the weaver's death as protective or teaching presences. Your road weaving was your legacy, the mark you left on the path. Future travelers might encounter threads from your weaving and feel your presence, learn from the pattern you'd created, be protected or guided by the connections you'd established. In this way, no practitioner who had truly committed to the road was ever entirely lost to death. They lived on in their weaving, their contribution to the great tapestry that was the Witch's Road itself. There were stories of road havens, places along the path that existed outside of normal geography, pocket dimensions or folded spaces where a traveler could rest in complete safety. Finding a road haven was rare and precious. Inside, you were protected from all dangers, physical and spiritual. Time moved differently. You might rest for what felt like days and emerge to find that only an hour had passed in the outside world, or vice versa. Some havens were natural formations, while others had been created by powerful practitioners as gifts to future travelers. Folklore describes rare road havens, protected spaces along the Witch's Road that existed partially outside normal reality, where travelers could rest in complete safety, where wounds healed faster, where food and water were always available, and where the normal dangers of the path couldn't reach, though finding these havens was largely a matter of luck or grace, as they often concealed themselves from those who weren't in genuine need. The havens were said to have their own gentle consciousness, a maternal quality that offered comfort without asking anything in return. Some practitioners spoke of being guided to a haven when they were near the breaking point, arriving to find everything they needed: shelter, sustenance, peace, and leaving refreshed in body and spirit, ready to continue their journey. The location of havens was never mapped or shared, for it was believed that they revealed themselves according to their own wisdom, not human knowledge. The concept of road justice was recognized in many traditions, the understanding that the witch's road had its own sense of fairness and would, in its own time and way, correct imbalances. Someone who exploited others, who used their knowledge of the path for harmful purposes, would eventually find the road turning against them. Conversely, those who walked with integrity, who helped others and honored the path, would find themselves aided in unexpected ways. This wasn't a mechanical system of reward and punishment, but something more organic, as if the road itself had values and responded accordingly. The witch's road was believed to possess its own moral sense, road justice, that would eventually correct imbalances, though not always in expected ways or on human timescales, with those who abused the path's power finding themselves gradually losing access or facing mysterious misfortunes, while those who walked with integrity received protection and unexpected assistance even in their darkest moments. Road justice was patient, sometimes taking years to manifest, but practitioners who had walked long enough had seen enough examples to believe firmly in its reality. This belief fostered ethical behavior not from fear of human judgment, but from respect for the path itself and recognition that your relationship with the road was the most important factor in determining the quality and safety of your journeys. The phenomenon of road aging was curious. Some practitioners seemed to age more slowly than others who walked the path less frequently, while others aged more rapidly. There didn't seem to be a consistent pattern. It was as if the road took different tolls from different people, or perhaps gave different gifts. Some believed that time spent on the witch's road didn't count toward your mortal lifespan, that you existed outside of time while walking and thus aged more slowly. Others thought that the transformative stress of road walking accelerated aging. Practitioners observed puzzling effects on physical aging from regular road walking. Some seemed to age more slowly, maintaining vitality and youth far longer than expected, while others appeared to age more rapidly, as if the intensity of their journeys compressed their lifespans, with no clear pattern determining which effect would occur, leading to theories that the road either extended or condensed one's allotted time based on mysterious factors possibly related to one's essential nature or purpose. The truth might be that both effects were real, that the road gave time to those who needed more years to complete their work, and compressed time for those whose intense burning was meant to be brief. Or perhaps it was simpler, that those who walked regularly existed partially outside of normal time, and the usual rules of aging simply didn't apply in the same way. The practice of road tithing appeared in some traditions, offering a portion of what you gained from your journeys back to the path itself or to the community of walkers. If you found healing knowledge on the road, you might return later to leave that knowledge where others could find it. If you received spiritual wealth, you would share it generously. If the road kept you safe during dangerous times, you would later help ensure the safety of other travelers. This practice of giving back maintained the flow of energy and knowledge along the path, preventing stagnation and ensuring that gifts continued to circulate. Some practitioners practiced road tithing, systematically giving back a portion of whatever they gained from the path, whether knowledge, healing, protection, or material resources, with the understanding that this reciprocal flow was essential to maintaining the road's vitality and ensuring that future generations could access its gifts as freely as they had. The tithe wasn't always given to the road directly. Sometimes it was paid forward to other practitioners, especially those just beginning their journey. An experienced walker might spend time teaching freely, or might provide resources to someone who couldn't afford them, or might protect a novice during their first dangerous passage. All of these acts were forms of road tithing, ways of maintaining the circulation of grace and knowledge that kept the entire system alive and healthy. There are accounts of road singing, the discovery that the path itself produced sounds, a low resonance that could be felt in the bones more than heard with the ears. Different sections of the road had different tones, and those with musical sensitivity could learn to recognize where they were by the particular frequency of that location. Some practitioners developed the ability to harmonize with the road singing, adding their own voice to create beautiful, powerful resonances that could open doors, heal wounds, or call assistance. The witch's road was said to produce its own constant low vibration, road singing, that could be sensed rather than heard, with different sections of the path resonating at different frequencies, and sensitive practitioners learned to recognize locations by their unique vibrational signature and to harmonize their own energy with the road song to achieve deeper communion and more powerful magical effects. Learning to perceive and work with road singing took years of practice, but once developed, it became one of the most reliable navigation tools a practitioner could possess. You could be blindfolded, turned around repeatedly, and placed on the road, and if you could feel it singing, you would know where you were and which direction to go. Some of the most beautiful magical workings happened when groups of practitioners would gather and collectively harmonize with the road, creating symphonies of power that rippled through the path's entire network. The concept of road names extended beyond the traveling names we discussed earlier. Some traditions held that the road itself had many names, and that knowing the right name for a particular section or aspect of the path gave you a certain relationship with it, a way of calling it forth or asking for its specific gifts. These names were closely guarded, passed from teacher to student in whispered confidence, for to know the true name of any part of the witch's road was to hold a key to profound power. The witch's road possessed numerous true names, some for specific sections, some for the path as a whole, some for its various aspects and personalities, and knowing these names granted deeper access and understanding, with the most powerful names known only to roadmasters and shared only with those proven worthy through years of dedicated practice and demonstrated wisdom. Collecting road names became a lifelong pursuit for some practitioners, not out of desire for power but from love of the path and desire for deeper relationship with it. Each name revealed was like making a new friend, discovering a new facet of something vast and beautiful that you would never fully comprehend but could always love more deeply. Finally, there is the understanding that is threaded through everything we've discussed tonight, the recognition that the witch's road is ultimately a metaphor made manifest, a symbol that has become real through centuries of belief and practice and transformation. It is both a physical path you can walk with your feet and a spiritual principle you walk with your soul. It is the journey toward self-knowledge, toward connection with the sacred, toward understanding your place in the great web of existence. Every person walks a version of the witch's road, whether they know it or not. Every choice that leads toward authenticity rather than conformity, every moment when you trust your deeper knowing over surface appearances, every time you step into the unknown with courage and curiosity. The ultimate teaching of the witch's road is that the sacred is not separate from the ordinary, that magic is not somewhere else but here, now in this breath, this moment, this quiet darkness as you drift towards sleep. And so our journey tonight comes to rest. 100 facts, 100 threads in the vast tapestry of knowledge about the witch's road. But these are only the beginning. The path holds infinite mysteries, infinite teachings, infinite journeys waiting to be taken. As you surrender now to sleep, know that you carry these stories with you, that they have changed something in you simply by being heard. The witch's road knows your name now. It has heard your listening. And whenever you are ready, whether tomorrow or a year from now or 10 years hence, it will be there waiting, patient as stone and wild as wind, ready to teach you what only it can teach, ready to show you what only it can show. Walk well, traveler. Walk in beauty and in power. Walk with awareness and with trust. The road rises to meet your feet. The stars light your way. And all the ancient walkers who have gone before whisper their blessings on your journey. Sleep now. Dream of the path. And wake renewed.